Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Charity Village webinar. We will just wait a moment for everyone to join the session. Okay, we will get started. Welcome to today's Charity Village webinar. My name is Mercedes, and I'm the Marketing and Communications Specialist with Charity Village. As we are gathering here in a virtual platform, it is important to acknowledge that each of us is joining this webinar from the ancestral or unceded lands of the Inuit, Métis, and First Nation people. As a settler on this land, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Anishinaabe, which includes the Ojibwe of Fort William First Nation. For those who may be joining a Charity Village webinar for the first time, Charity Village is Canada's largest online job board for the nonprofit sector. In addition to our online job board, organizations can also post volunteer positions. So if you are looking for work or to recruit talent in the sector, Charity Village is a great place to start. We also have a ton of excellent resources for nonprofit professionals, including online courses, articles, fundraising tools, and free webinars like the one we are presenting today. Before we start today's webinar, I would like to quickly run through some housekeeping items. You may have noticed when you joined the webinar that you were automatically put on mute. Since we have hundreds of participants in today's session, it is important for us to minimize the amount of background noise so that everyone can clearly hear the presentation. But you can still ask questions and make comments using the question box at the bottom of the Zoom control panel. Look for that at the bottom of your screen. We will be taking questions at the end of the webinar, so please submit your questions as you think of them, and we will do our best to get to as many as possible. You can also email your questions to webinars@charityvillage.com. If you happen to encounter any technical issues with the webinar, whether it's viewing the presentation or with the audio, please let us know in the question box or by sending us an email. We will do our best to get any technical difficulties resolved as quickly as possible, but in a worst case scenario, please remember that we are recording today's webinar and we will send you the full recording by email tomorrow. So if you get called away or disconnected, you will still be able to view the full presentation. And with that, I would like to welcome our presenters for today, Omar Visram, the co-founder and CEO of Enkel Back Office Solutions, Shirley Wolf, a leader in the CFO Services Group at Enkel Back Office Solutions, and Dorinda So, the Executive Director of pointA. Welcome.
Great, thank you so much for having us. All right. Really excited to be here to start. I will just tell you a little bit about Enkel. So I co-founded Enkel in 2016, really with a simple problem in mind that you can't build a great organization without good books. Fast forward to today, we have about 300 clients. We've worked with over 100 not-for-profit and charitable organizations across the country. We have 80 team members with what we call a global delivery model, and we focus on financial operations, not advisory, tax, and assurance work. Enkel would like to acknowledge that our offices are situated on the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. In terms of our core services at Enkel, these are our 6 core services. So we provide not-for-profit and charitable organizations with some combination of these services, from bookkeeping, payroll, accounts payable, accounts receivable, controllership, and CFO services. We usually are able to put together a great solution for your customized needs. All right, and now over to Shirley.
Thanks, Omar, and good morning and good afternoon to all our participants. We have a great lineup for our webinar today. We'll be sharing with you the history of our outsourcing arrangement with pointA, and you'll have the chance to hear the perspectives of our client, Dorinda So, Executive Director at pointA. We'll also be giving you a high-level overview of outsourcing generally and getting started with outsourcing at Enkel, so you can get a picture of what that looks like. Omar will be taking you deeper into our onboarding process and work processes after the go-live date. and I'll be sharing with you how you can benefit from long-term outsourcing partnerships. But before we get started, we have a polling question for you. So on a scale of 1 to 5, how far along are you? How far along are you with outsourcing your non-core functions? 1 would be just considering it, and 5 would be it's definitely happening. So we're just going to give you a few moments to respond to the question, and I'll share the results with you. Great, so it looks like we've had about 96 people responding, and most of you are in category 1, which means you're just considering it. I think the next highest category is number 5, where we have about 9% of our participants. But by far, the majority is in that category 1. So we really hope that today's session will be very useful for you. So now we're going to be looking at our outsourcing arrangement with pointA. So pointA and Enkel have been working together since 2020, which of course was a pivotal time as this coincided with the onset of the pandemic. As with many organizations at that time, pointA needed to move from a paper-based environment to the cloud. And Enkel's technology suite enabled this to happen quickly. I've had the privilege of working with Dorinda over the last 18 months, assisting with a range of services such as preparing for and supporting the audit process, reviewing budgets and forecasts, assisting with cash management, and attending audit and finance committee meetings. I also enjoy being a sounding board for Dorinda as new issues and opportunities arise for pointA. As Omar mentioned a little earlier, Enkel's core services are bookkeeping, accounts payable, payroll, and controllership, and these are the services that we've been providing to pointA. We have a very collaborative working relationship, and our mutual focus on meeting our commitments to one another has led to a positive experience and timely delivery of financial information to pointA. We're now going to look at functions that typically lend themselves to outsourcing. And of course, there are a wide range of services that organizations can outsource. And we've included here functions that are more commonly outsourced by not-for-profit organizations. In addition to the accounting services we've touched on, organizations may choose to also outsource CFO services, either on a continuous basis or for specific projects. Outsourced human resource services often encompass the hiring and termination of employees, performance management, and the development of HR policies, while IT services may encompass IT support, maintenance, security, backups, and hardware replacement. Not-for-profits often benefit from marketing and fundraising expertise when developing fundraising campaigns and holding fundraising events, as well as refreshing their brand. Legal services are often used to ensure that not-for-profits are complying with laws and regulations and contracts, and for advice on potential legal claims or the handling of actual legal claims that may have arisen. I'm on the board of a charity, and we've recently considered getting legal advice to bring clarity because the terms of a deed of trust from a donor have been found to be ambiguous and open to interpretation. So I'm now going to hand back to Omar, who's going to take us through the next section of our presentation.
Thank you, Shirley. So is it time to consider outsourcing? Some considerations that I find the not-for-profit and charity clients that we've worked with in the past have made and that we've spoken to about are listed here. First and foremost, this is often the main driver, is really a lack of in-house expertise. And really, clients come to us in all shapes and sizes. What I mean by this is that clients come to us, some with a great deal of infrastructure on the finance side and are just looking to do things differently, or perhaps they've had somebody give notice and they're looking to fill a resourcing gap. Others come to us because of a lack of process and infrastructure and really don't have anything. It would really surprise you the range that we see in similar sized organizations, and that's okay. We believe that every NPO deserves good quality financials and financial processes, and this should come at a price that offers great value to the organization. So how do we do it? We build a small team of finance professionals who focus on tasks in which they are experts to deliver great outcomes to you. Limited resources is, of course, another consideration. The compliance needs of not-for-profit organizations are ultimately quite involved, especially when compared to a business of a similar scale. Having one person to do it all often just does not work. Also, bookkeeping and accounting frequently falls to the bottom of the list in terms of priorities. Outside of payroll, let's face it, it's rarely a fire until one day it hits you and it is a fire. Time efficiency. So think about the cost of overseeing bookkeeping as an internal function. If you are managing the accounting internally, this is an overhead that often gets forgotten. But really, how much executive director time goes into managing bookkeeping? We find that it's often a lot. Recruitment challenges. I was just speaking to a potential client the other day in a remote area. It can be especially challenging to find people in remote areas, but even in larger urban centers, finding accounting talent has become much harder. And also the cost of keeping these people has increased considerably. Also scalability. What happens if you get a new grant and spending ramps up suddenly? Or you need to hire 10 new people? What happens to the payroll function? We've seen a lot of our not-for-profit clients experience significant swings, receiving new funding. All of a sudden, some new funding lands and it's time to spend. But with that comes the administrative burden around increased bookkeeping capacity needs. If you outsource, it's typically easier to scale the finance function. All right, Shirley, back over to you.
Great, thank you. And Dorinda, we're so pleased to have you participate in our webinar today, and we're eager to hear your perspectives on your outsourcing arrangement with Enkel. So winding back the clock to 2020, how did you know it was time to consider outsourcing?
Yeah, it's great to be here. And I just wanted to take a moment to introduce pointA, because every time I say I work for pointA, everyone's always like, what's that? And so we've actually been around for 20 years. We've had a lot of names. So that's why everyone's always like, I don't know who you are. But we're all about sustainable commuting. So whether that's, you're working from home or you're carpooling or cycling or walking, we really want to promote and provide workplaces and their employees with resources to be able to get to work sustainably, hopefully saving some money, saving some time, making some friends along the way. And we're really excited too, because we're at a really interesting point where we just launched our Best Workplaces for Commuters program. So it recognizes employers for their investment in employee commuting and making sure that it's sustainable. So we get to work with workplaces every single day, and it is a rare opportunity to be able to kind of talk about what it's like to run an organization. And so for us, when I started at pointA, it was actually mid-2019. And we had a CPA come in once every 2 weeks to do our books and to do payroll. And so she was really helpful, and she's so smart. And she really helped me with my onboarding. But I very quickly noticed that there were some parts of our organization where we weren't fully aligned with our mission. And I think that that's so important when you're thinking about outsourcing. Like, does what we're doing and who we're working with actually align with the whole point of our organization? And so we were printing a lot of paper, and we had so many files, and everything was so paper-based. And I was like, okay, like, I don't think this is totally aligned, but I didn't want to do, I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to change anything because kind of what Omar was speaking about, the lack of expertise. Like, I'm not a CPA. In fact, I really didn't do very well in school when it came to financial accounting. And I think so many of you can probably relate that, God forbid, you don't have that piece of paper, like the CRA, might be knocking on your door. So we were really scared about what would happen if we were to change our arrangement. So one of the things that helped us move towards outsourcing was actually developing a remote work strategy. Our board approved it in November 2019, and I know what you're thinking, it's like I knew. But this was actually really important to help us strategically start to have the conversation around moving our financials to a more cloud-based online remote system. Of course, fast forward 2020 hits, and we were like, does it make sense that we're asking, an older adult to come in to the office during lockdown? We're based in Toronto, and for those of you who know, we were in lockdown for like maybe 3 years. So it didn't make sense for us to do this. And we had one copy of QuickBooks Desktop on a computer that was from 2008. And we were backing up all of the files not on a cloud-based server. We were backing them onto a USB key. So I remember thinking, like, if I breathe on this computer wrong, like, we are going to have our problem. So we had to eventually move and part ways with our amazing accountant because remote just wasn't working. And it was during the pandemic. We were really scared. And I think that I would love to say, by the way, moving to Enkel was just like, we moved from our accountant immediately to Enkel. It wasn't. We really had to take a step back and think about, what do we really care about? So in addition to kind of missional alignment and obviously expertise, it is so important, by the way, to work with a CPA and people who know what they're doing, because even things like payroll, there are so many complicated factors. But also, I think it's really important to be transparent. If you have one copy of QuickBooks Desktop that one person can access at a time, or you have a piece of paper that you have to go into the office to find, whether you're doing your audit or you're trying to report to your board or just trying to do any kind of financial, it becomes very challenging. So I think that's really important. And the last thing I'll say is, like, we really needed people who understood nonprofits, because a lot of times people just think like, oh, nonprofits, charities, like, they're just like any other business. And yeah, you're a business, but it's very different, as I'm sure all of you know. And also our budgets are sometimes really different. Omar talked about the swings that you can have. So finding a vendor that really could match with your existing budget for financials is really important.
Great, thanks so much, Dorinda. And I didn't appreciate that you were actually ahead of the curve and so well prepared when the pandemic did affect you. But really like the way that you thought through it and made sure that the choices that you were making were aligned with your strategy. So how did you actually feel as you started the journey on outsourcing?
Yeah, we were really scared. I'll be honest. It was pandemic, but it was also, you don't know what you don't know. And so a lot of the times, like, we didn't know like who to connect with. And we were like, I've never done remote. I've only ever worked with accountants. And so we actually started with like word of mouth to figure out who to actually go with. And so you're relying a lot of the times on outside kind of resources and expertise to support us. And it was definitely a bit of a journey before coming to Enkel, and I'm sure I'll be able to share that later on.
Great. Well, actually, that just leads into the next question about how the sort of journey that you did start on, and how that led to being at Enkel.
Yeah, so it was a long procurement process. We made a lot of very tiny steps. It's like definitely I could write a novel on it. I will say the biggest step we took was undergoing a pretty comprehensive procurement review, finding firms that met all the things I just talked about, including, of course, like redundancy and contingency. You don't want to just work with one or two people in a firm. You want to make sure you're working with a team. And I even involved my board, the CPAs on there, to be like, help me out here. And we spent so much time reviewing all of the vendors I spoke with, and it just didn't feel right. Like there was just always something missing. And so I consulted our friend Google, which I know you're probably thinking, why didn't you do that first? I honestly, 2020, I think a lot of us probably understand what it was like. And that's actually how I found Enkel. And we had an initial call and everything was really great. And that's how we made the decision. We were like, I think this fits everything we're looking for. And let's go for it.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Dorinda. And I'll be back again shortly with more questions for you. But in the meantime, I'm going to hand back to Omar, who's going to take us through Enkel's client onboarding process.
Excellent, thank you. It was fun to hear that little recap there, Dorinda. Let's talk about some typical onboarding steps. Now, different vendors, of course, will have different processes. This is the way that we've found the best roadmap to onboarding a client into the Enkel environment. It takes anywhere from 30 to 90 days to onboard a client. The reason for that significant variance, 30 to 90 days is a pretty broad range, is it depends on the preparedness of the organization. Many clients come to us already on our tool stack, books relatively up to date. Others need a lot of work before they're able to get into a stable, steady rhythm. Now, it all starts with a kickoff call. So in the kickoff call, our sales team introduces the client to the onboarding team, and we really discuss objectives of the onboarding journey. We get into some of the nuances, potential challenges, and the goal at the end of this call is to help our clients really understand where we're going, what we're going to need next, and what results they can expect through the onboarding journey and at the end of the onboarding journey. We then have a welcome call, and this is the point. It's a welcome call with a detailed checklist that we go through with our clients. And this is to start getting access to all existing systems. So if you have QuickBooks, it's getting the right level of access to QuickBooks, getting access to your CRA account. Currently, I just looked at this checklist. It's around 12 items, and some of these items can be a little bit tricky to get. And so we really work with you. The goal is to make sure that we don't just put this on you and make you go chase it. We work with you through the process so that we can help you jump through any hoops that you might need to jump through to get the right pieces of information and the access over to us. We do an accounting deep dive, so it's very important to us as a service provider to you to have a clean starting point. And like I said, organizations come to us in various shapes and sizes. And so we want to make sure that the starting point of our work is clean and up to our standard. Tools training, so we make sure that any of the technology that we implement, the workflow around that tool is clearly explained to you and to any of the stakeholders that will be using the tools. This can include anything from yourself, perhaps the executive director, operations manager, any team members submitting expense reports, even board members who have to approve expenses. We would like to get everybody trained so that once we go live, everybody knows exactly how things work. And then we have this concept of go live. This is when everything is in place, and we're ready to begin delivering to you on the schedule that we commit to you. And so, for instance, if it's the case that you will get your payables listing on the 15th and the 30th, as an example, you can now expect those deliverables from us on time and on schedule. We also do periodic check-ins throughout our relationship, but especially at the beginning, we want to make sure that you're set up for success. You also have the ability to reach out for help, and we explain all of this to you when you start working with us. So that's our typical onboarding journey. We have a team that is dedicated to helping you through the onboarding journey because it is so different for every client that comes through. There are always different scenarios. Sometimes we can't even speak to the people that did the accounting previously. So we really want to invest the time into making sure that we get this right with you. All right. So moving along here, I will pass it back to Shirley.
Right. Thanks, Omar. And Dorinda, I'm going to invite you to rewind to about 5 years ago. So this will be 2019, before the pandemic started. So can you share with us how you managed pointA's financial operations prior to starting with Enkel?
Yes. So I did mention a little bit about our setup with our QuickBooks desktop, and we had an accountant who came in, and everything was paper-based. So we did very little direct deposit. There was almost little to no tech integration, and a lot of it was like printing checks and having them signed. And for any of you who understand what that's like, for us, it was like sustainable commuting. So that means you get the fun task of walking, sometimes taking transit to get your check signed once every 2 weeks. So I did that a lot. I did have help. We had a full-time office manager to support all of that work. And of course, you know this, once you get a check back, it's photocopying, filing, digitalizing. We weren't fully there yet, but some things we did scan. So it was a lot of paper-based work, and it took a lot of time. And obviously we had a whole person doing all of that. And I will say, like, I really didn't get a chance to really look at the books often. It was just kind of, I would be asked specific questions, and then the books would kind of magically appear, and then I would just submit them to our board. And same thing with audit season. Like, you kind of pack a box, literally, of paper, you send it to your auditor, and then it feels like magically your financial statements kind of come back, which sounds really great, but when you're trying to run an organization and you need to actually learn the financials and make decisions based on the numbers, probably not the best way of going about things. So we definitely needed to change.
Right. And as we said, that was just so timely. So Omar's given us an overview of the onboarding process at Enkel, and I was wondering what it was like for you getting started with Enkel.
Well, we were definitely the 90-day. So in case you're wondering, why does it take so long? Yes, we were definitely like, I was like, is 90 days even enough? Because everything was paper-based. And I did spend a lot of the time during the pandemic going to our office and scanning documents. We had to digitalize all of our documents. So I got to know the paper really, really well. But we definitely took a minute to figure out everything because there's a lot of cleaning up to do. We actually were the ones who loaded our QuickBooks desktop onto online, and we're not professionals. They make it sound really easy, but you have to make sure that everything is in good order before you actually can really start to move forward. And so there's a lot of cleaning up that we had to do. And learning the technology, though, was really exciting. We were like, this is going to change our lives. And it did. I think the key thing I will say is that it really felt like instead of, oh, your accountant is your expert and they'll tell you what to do and you don't know anything, it really felt like we were being guided through a process and that we had a sense of ownership over what was going to happen around our books and the process. And that was such a different experience in terms of like our relationship with our financials and who we worked with.
That's really great to hear. And it certainly sounds like you've made a very significant transition from being paper-based to having embraced technology and are really benefiting from the technology. I'm also interested to know how many people on your team were involved and how they were involved through that transition.
Yes, so we mainly just had myself and our office manager as part of the transition. And basically, she would be the one who would do the kind of the first pass, then I would do the second pass, but we would collectively make sure that any receipts and things like that were going through and were put through the various like systems that Enkel uses. And that was really great because we weren't doing that initially. It was mainly like our office manager doing a lot of this, and I kind of like sign checks and check things in the back, but wasn't as involved. So I got to be more involved, which was really great. And that actually is important because then it's a lot of that redundancy to make sure that multiple people are checking, which is so important in general to make sure there's no errors and very much aligned with how we operate at pointA.
Excellent. And I have a last question here for you. Do you have any insights to share with our participants on getting started with an outsourcing arrangement?
Yes, I think the main thing I'll say is when you're starting with any new vendor, it is going to feel like a lot. And it's going to really change the way you operate. And I would say if you're able to document processes and figure out what does it look like before and how it's going to change, because it is going to affect someone's job. It changed our office manager's job. It changed some of my job. That was really important to know, like, okay, document things and understand them, but also like to track what the impact is. Like for us, we really wanted to understand what was the value of having more redundancy or like these, having technology integrated. Those are the things that you can look and determine. And I think when you look at it from that particular perspective, for us, that 90 days was way less daunting because we knew that at the end of that period of time, we were going to have like really good books and we were going to be able to work much more effectively, especially remotely. So it gave me a lot of peace of mind, even though going into it, I really didn't know what to expect.
Thank you so much, Dorinda. I'm really glad to hear that the effort that went in on the part of you and your office manager was really worth it. So once the onboarding process has been completed, our bookkeeping team then steps in and they process the transactions each month. The financial statements then go under a review by a senior bookkeeper, and the financial reports are prepared for our clients. So the financial package typically includes standard reports such as the balance sheet, the income statement, and the accounts payable and accounts receivable listings. But we also incorporate any customized reports that our clients wish to have. And many of our not-for-profit clients request an income statement with their programs included, and also actual to budget reports, so you can track where you are at any given point in time in your fiscal year against your budget. We also prepare customized reports for boards of directors and also for funding organizations. We find out what you're needing from a reporting perspective during the onboarding stage and then adapt to your evolving needs. I'm going to hand back to Omar to ask Dorinda for her insights around her monthly reporting.
Thank you, Shirley. All right, Dorinda. First question for you is, how do you share data or inputs with Enkel on a monthly basis?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways. The great thing is a lot of it is like pretty much like a forward of an email. That's what we do, and it gets captured into a system that takes all of your receipts. Or there's like an app version of that. You take a picture of your receipts and then off it goes. So that's one way. There's also a checklist that you get, which is really helpful because who doesn't love a checklist? I love checking a box. So you can upload files that way, you can put in comments, and we do it like that. Or also sometimes we do email certain things if that is like something really special. And of course, because Enkel is like fully remote in terms of the way they operate, we can share files on like Google Drive or whatever that makes sense. So many different ways with sharing information with Enkel monthly.
Thank you. And how do you use your monthly financial statements to help guide your strategy?
Yeah, so this is like relatively new for us because when we first started, we weren't, of course, prior to working with Enkel, we weren't really getting like monthly financial statements, or I didn't really get to see them. And so I think the first thing is just to make sure, like, do we miss something? Is something wrong, or needs to be maybe like put in the right account? So it's a really good check. And that's important because sometimes we make mistakes. And a lot of the times it's like, oh, I made an error on this. And that's really important from a process perspective. So I'm always thinking about process and making sure we're improving that. And from a strategic perspective, it is important to understand like cash flow, investment decisions. If any of you are like, oh, depending on how much cash we have, we need to invest that amount of money. But also, as Shirley comes to our ANF committee meetings, and so whenever I used to get grilled a lot on like, what is this $2 charge? You have someone to support you and help you.
Great. And how do you communicate with Enkel, Dorinda?
Mostly it is email if we really need to like connect, but I really consider like the checklist we get kind of like it is a communication tool because you'll get like the comments and then they comment back, and so there's that kind of communication. And then Shirley and I have like monthly calls as well to go through everything just to clean things up, ask any questions, that kind of thing. But otherwise, I feel like everyone's always available to us via email.
Great, thank you. And the last question here, a little bit bigger picture perhaps, and a summary of some of the things that we've asked you already. But how is life different than when you were managing the function in-house?
I think the biggest piece is that because we're now on a monthly reporting cycle, it really means that your financial kind of tasks and what you're doing is no longer something you do every single day. And some of you probably understand what that's like because there's so much like admin with paper-based work. So we have really reduced so much of our workload. Like I think we calculated even a year after working with Enkel, we had reduced our workload by 64%, which was a savings of about $13,000. And in fact, we now have actually sunsetted the office manager position. She still works for us, by the way. So she's amazing, and she's able to work on a program, actually our Best Workplaces for Commuters program. That's her background, it's in programs. So we got to still keep her. And now I probably spend way less time on our financials because of all that Enkel really provides.
Great. Sorry, so that was $13,000 in savings. And what was the other data point you shared there? 64%.
64% in our workload. So the hours that we were spending on financials.
Wow. Okay, just related to financial statement preparation receipt gathering, all of that. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you for sharing that. All right. Shirley, back over to you.
Thank you. I know we've covered so much content around the benefits of outsourcing and long-term partnerships, but I did want to just take this opportunity just to emphasize some points again. So certainly at the top of our list is cost optimization. Many small to medium-sized not-for-profit organizations may not have the financial resources to hire a full-time staff member, or even commit to a certain level of hours for a part-time staff member. And as Omar mentioned a little earlier, some organizations may also experience difficulties attracting and retaining employees. And by outsourcing, you can access the necessary resources and actually pay only for the time that you need. Another good reason for outsourcing is if you don't actually have that expertise in-house, or you may have other priorities and don't actually have the time to focus on what needs to get done. Outsourcing arrangements are typically flexible and they can be scaled up or down depending on the needs of your organization. And they're often a good fit for project-based work. A longer-term relationship allows your outsourcing partner to get an in-depth understanding of your organization, and this leads to lower risks of errors occurring, increased efficiency and quality of work, and overall better outcomes. Dorinda, I'm coming back to you, and I'd like to wrap up with some final questions about your overall experience with outsourcing at Enkel. So what would you say are the key benefits you've experienced from having outsourced financial operations?
I think for me, it really has been a real education in our books and understanding things from end to end, because often you don't get that if someone is kind of managing them. And that's been really important because again, you're making those decisions about, should I apply for this grant? Who should we be working with? What should we price things? You need to know your books to be able to do that. Also, of course, having Shirley on hand to be able to ask those questions or even to review our budget has been so helpful. It really is important to have a sounding board to really figure that part out. And that is also critical because financials underpin everything you do. I hate to almost admit that because I feel like, I wish I was an accountant, I could say that, but it really is. And so whether you're making decisions about HR and who to hire and your growth, we really needed to understand our financials to do that. And Enkel just gives you those resources and then also gives you kind of like the keys to be able to do that. It's like, here, you can access your QuickBooks file yourself and go and run reports so you can learn how to do that. For us, it's also the fact that we have been able to save money and time. That's incredibly valuable, right? Because I'm sure that all of you would rather be doing what your core functions are and rather than like working on your books, unless of course that's your thing, then that's amazing. That's not mine. And so that is ultimately really important. And the fact that I'm better able to allocate my HR resources to move from an office manager position, being able to sunset that position, transition into a programs role has meant that that is growth for not just our organization, but for that particular person. And so I think there's so many benefits. I think the last thing I'll say too is the things that we don't think about are like, if you have a lot of files, and we did, because we've been around for 20 years, where are you going to store those files? And sometimes you need a bigger office space than you think. And so we were able to actually move to a much smaller footprint, which again is so aligned with what we do in sustainable commuting, and not have to pay for that extra space for your files or even to like photocopy things. So we're so thankful that we have everything digitalized and we're able to access it anytime.
That's really great to hear, Dorinda, and certainly from an accounting perspective, or an accountant's perspective, I can certainly concur that having those timely, high quality financial statements are really key to making decisions. And it's great to hear that you are having the support that you need as you contemplate those decisions that need to be made. What sort of key results have you achieved through this period of outsourcing your finance and accounting function?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've mentioned quite a few of them, but I actually, looking at the next question, I think that's actually a big part of this, was just changing our processes. And that's something that I think is any one of you, when you run an organization, you know that like process improvement is really important. We've gone through so much because of the pandemic, and I know that that has like disrupted so much of the way that we do our work. And I think that for us, it has been so helpful for us to have our financials fully remote, because now we're able to leverage, what we kind of all went through, which wasn't great, into something that not only has helped us from a financial perspective, of course, but also from an HR perspective, from an actual process operations perspective. And it gives me so much like peace of mind knowing that we have a guide to tell us like, okay, here's how to go through your, everyday or your monthly processes, and has significantly reduced the workload. I probably spend now maybe like a day, 2 days on our month end, and that's kind of it. So that's been really critical. And I think the last thing I'll say is that it really has changed our relationship with our board as well, so that they're able to also better understand our business. And I'm going to quote you, Shirley, because you told us that we are a small but complicated organization. And the clarity of having things like classes, which are like our programs in QuickBooks, has really changed the game in seeing where dollars are coming in and where dollars are going out. And so I think those are a few of the ways that it's changed us, but it's also been really positive.
That's really great to hear how you've been able to streamline your processes and drive efficiencies within your organization. And Dorinda, also very importantly, just to free up more of your time as executive director for the organization and to be focusing more strategically on the business. I'm also interested to know how, from your perspective, Enkel works with your auditors.
Yes. I'm going to share a story about what it was like well, I'm going to say this is like our first audit with Enkel. So for any of you who are like, what's the first audit like? I remember our auditor sent us, a list of things. She's great, but like definitely you need a backup for everything and a piece of evidence. And she's like, where is the entry on this one line? And I remember thinking, oh, I don't know, but I'm gonna try to find it. And I found the pencil scrawling, literally that note. It was like on a margin in like a stack of paper, and I had it was digitalized. So I was going through so many files to find this. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, I'm so glad we're with Enkel, because you don't have to do that anymore. You just search it. Everything is digitalized, so you can actually like find it, you don't have to like look through files, because we were also looking through files sometimes, like the physical ones, to do that. And we've also really changed our process with Enkel. So we used to kind of pull all the files ourselves, of course, because we had an office manager. And going into our audit, which is starting soon, we won't be doing that. So Enkel actually is going to be supporting us and pulling all the documents, and everything with our auditor is online. I'm sure some of you know that life. And it will be very different this year, so that my focus can be on the notes, working with our board so that they're comfortable with whatever it is that they want represented, and then just making sure that we have everything overall ready to go, and understanding how this year's books is going to affect our next year. So it really has changed so significantly.
Excellent. And Dorinda, just finally, do you have any advice that you'd like to share with your fellow not-for-profit leaders on this webinar?
I think the biggest thing that I've learned is that the best kind of vendor is one that grows with you. We started off working with Enkel just on our accounts payable and our bookkeeping, and now we've grown to having Shirley as our controller, which actually was a recommendation by our auditor. And of course, now payroll is going to be happening as well. So we've really been able to have them grow with us. And that is so critical because it means that there's an ongoing dialogue and ongoing education, mostly mine. And it means that we're developing a real relationship and trust. And when it comes to your financials, you need that. I think especially with the pandemic, it's really taught us the importance of having redundancy and contingency, so that whether you're succession planning, and that's like a really positive thing, or you're growing your organization, as Omar was mentioning, and you really need those additional resources, or, you know, God forbid something really not so great happens, you have a trusted partner who understands your business, understands your books, and is able to like keep things going, because financials, you know, they never end. And so it's really important to have that kind of very seamless continuity of work, because your business is really important. So I know that sometimes like these are the things that keep us up at night, and we feel like we don't know how to address some of these big questions. And maybe you're facing like a lot of financial, you know, concerns too. I know I definitely stepped into that. It's really helpful to have a partner like Enkel who can really be there for you.
Dorinda, thank you so much for your participation today and for sharing your valuable insights with us. And I'm now going to hand back to Omar to wrap up our session today.
Thank you so much. What great insights, Dorinda. Thank you for being here with us today. If you are rethinking your financial operations, please feel free to book me for a consultation. You can reach out to me. My email address is here, or our Contact Us page can be found at the bottom. But I think we have time for some questions now, so let's jump into that. Just switching gears here a little bit.
Omar, there are a number of questions here about the types of businesses served by Enkel. Would you like to respond to that one?
Yes, that's a great question. So today, about a third of our clients are not-for-profits and charities. And within not-for-profits and charities, I'd say it's quite broad. Surely you can speak to this as well. We have small charities. We have a number of organizations, I would say, in terms of size and scope, that look a little bit like pointA. Shirley, any other specifics you can add there on the not-for-profit and charities that you work with?
Absolutely. So really they do range in size. If we think about revenues, some organizations have less than $1 million in revenues, and really anywhere up to about $15 million. So we work with charities. We also work with not-for-profit organizations that are not charities. But we have a great team, both from a bookkeeping perspective and a controllership perspective, who have extensive experience working with not-for-profit organizations. So certainly come with that industry knowledge, which, as Dorinda said earlier, is really so important. We also have extensive experience working with auditors. Most of our charitable clients are audited, and that's a process that we have very well defined. There's also
Um,
a question about the software that is used by Enkel, and perhaps Omar can ask you to comment on that.
Yeah, the software that we use, we've tested a lot of software out there. Before we deploy anything to our clients, we research the tool extensively. We make sure, one, that we're comfortable with the tool from a compliance perspective and from a security perspective, and we have a technology team that looks after that. But in terms of core tools, I'll just speak to a few. So there's Dext. Dorinda was talking about, just taking a picture of a receipt. That's the tool that she was referring to there. Dext is something that I'd say our clients interact with quite a bit because that's the place that you send your invoices and receipts. QuickBooks Online is our core accounting platform for all not-for-profit clients. We do also use Xero. Payworks is our payroll platform that we use for all clients that engage us for payroll. It's got some excellent time and attendance software, absence management tracking. We also use Pluto. We've actually done some work with Pluto in the past. And Pluto is a really great tool for not-for-profit organizations. I actually went looking for it because somebody had come to me and said, hey, we are driving checks around town to get board members to approve. And I thought there must be a better solution to this. And there is. That solution is Pluto. We are able to route payment approvals to the appropriate people in the organization and pay people or your vendors in 3 different ways: direct deposit, e-transfer, it's e-transfer without the upper cap, or Pluto will actually mail a check on your behalf from their Toronto office to your vendor, which I think is pretty neat too. So that's just a quick summary of the tool stack. There are some others out there that we use in specific situations, but those are really our core tools.
Great. Thank you, Omar. We perhaps have time for one other quick question. So a question has come in about whether Enkel is available to do a charity's annual tax return. And Enkel does not provide the service, but you would be able to approach a public accounting firm that carries the requisite licenses to complete the registered charity information return for you, or if you're not a charity, to complete your T2 and possibly your T1044 form as well. Great. There are a number of other questions that have come in today, but unfortunately, time is running out, so we won't have the opportunity to respond to the others, but we will certainly review the questions and provide written responses to the participants. So thank you very much for submitting your questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for presenting such an informative webinar. Do you happen to have any final comments before we sign off today, Omar?
Yes, thank you. So as you've heard from Dorinda today, the evolution of your back office, it takes time. It's a bit of a journey. We have a lot of conversations with people and the timing just isn't right. So what I would say is, if you are at the beginning of that journey, and we know from the beginning polling question that many of you are, please reach out to us. We'd love to give you some of the beginning steps that you might want to consider before you embark on this journey. Thank you so much to our partners at Charity Village for having us, and of course, Dorinda, for your time in helping us put this together today. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful day.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Omar, Shirley, and Dorinda. I just wanted to remind everyone that you will receive a follow-up email tomorrow with a link to the webinar recording. Please feel free to share this link with your colleagues. The email will also include a survey link that you can fill out with your feedback on today's webinar. You should see a survey link pop up right here in Zoom following the session as well. On behalf of Charity Village, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you'll join us for our next free webinar, Burnout in the Nonprofit Sector, What You Need to Know. You can find more information on this and all of our upcoming webinars at charityvillage.com/webinars. Thanks again for joining us today. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.